Some fools would be the better for a good drubbing, as well as having their hair pulled. I am not talking of my late husband now. Katerina Ivanovna snapped at him. The flush on her cheeks grew more and more marked, her chest heaved. In another minute she would have been ready to make a scene. Many of the visitors were sniggering, evidently delighted. They began poking the commissariat clerk and whispering something to him. They were evidently trying to egg him on. "Allow me to ask, what are you alluding to?" began the clerk. "That is to say, whose, about whom, did you say just now? But I don't care, that's nonsense. Widow, I forgive you. Pass." And he took another drink of vodka. Raskolnikov sat in silence, listening with disgust. He only ate from politeness, just tasting the food that Katerina Ivanovna was continually putting on his plate, to avoid hurting her feelings. He watched Sonya intently, but Sonya became more and more anxious and distressed. She, too, foresaw that the dinner would not end peaceably, and saw with terror Katerina Ivanovna's growing irritation. She knew that she, Sonya, was the chief reason for the genteel lady's contemptuous treatment of Katerina Ivanovna's invitation. She had heard from Amalia Ivanovna that the mother was positively offended at the invitation and had asked the question, how could she let her daughter sit down beside that young person? Sonya had a feeling that Katerina Ivanovna had already heard this, and an insult to Sonya meant more to Katerina Ivanovna than an insult to herself, her children, or her father. Sonya knew that Katerina Ivanovna would not be satisfied now, till she had shown those draggle-tails that they were both. To make matters worse, someone passed Sonya, from the other end of the table, a plate with 2 hearts pierced with an arrow, cut out of black bread. Katerina Ivanovna flushed crimson and at once said aloud across the table that the man who sent it was a drunken ass. Amalia Ivanovna was foreseeing something amiss, and at the same time deeply wounded by Katerina Ivanovna's haughtiness, and to restore the good humor of the company and raise herself in their esteem she began, apropos of nothing, telling a story about an acquaintance of hers, Karl from the chemist S., who was driving one night in a cab, and that the cabman wanted him to kill, and Karl very much begged him not to kill, and wept and clasped hands, and frightened and from fear pierced his heart. Though Katerina Ivanovna smiled, she observed at once that Amalia Ivanovna ought not to tell anecdotes in Russian. The latter was still more offended, and she retorted that her Vaderos Berlin was a very important man, and always went with his hands in pockets. Katerina Ivanovna could not restrain herself, and laughed so much that Amalia Ivanovna lost patience, and could scarcely control herself. "Listen to the owl," Katerina Ivanovna whispered at once, her good humor almost restored. She meant to say he kept his hands in his pockets, but she said he put his hands in people's pockets. Cough, cough. "And have you noticed, Rodion Romanovich, that all these Petersburg foreigners, the Germans especially, are all stupider than we? Can you fancy any one of us telling how Karl from the chemist S. pierced his heart from fear, and that the idiot, instead of punishing the cabman, clasped his hands and wept, and much begged? Ah, the fool, and you know she fancies it's very touching and does not suspect how stupid she is. To my thinking that drunken commissariat clerk is a great deal cleverer. Anyway, one can see that he has addled his brains with drink. But you know, these foreigners are always so well behaved and serious. Look how she sits glaring. She is angry, ha-ha, cough, cough, cough." Regaining her good humor, Katerina Ivanovna began at once telling Raskolnikov that, when she had obtained her pension, she intended to open a school for the daughters of gentlemen in her native town T. This was the first time she had spoken to him of the project, and she launched out into the most alluring details. It suddenly appeared that Katerina Ivanovna had in her hands the very certificate of honor of which Marmeladov had spoken to Raskolnikov in the tavern, when he told him that Katerina Ivanovna, his wife, had danced the shawl dance before the governor and other great personages on leaving school. This certificate of honor was obviously intended now to prove Katerina Ivanovna's right to open a boarding school, but she had armed herself with it chiefly with the object of overwhelming those 2 stuck-up draggle-tails, if they came to the dinner, and proving incontestably that Katerina Ivanovna was of the most noble, she might even say aristocratic family, a colonel's daughter, and was far superior to certain adventuresses who have been so much to the fore of late. The certificate of honor immediately passed into the hands of the drunken guests, and Katerina Ivanovna did not try to retain it, for it actually contained the statement en toutes letters that her father was of the rank of a major, and also a companion of an order, so that she really was almost the daughter of a colonel. Warming up, Katerina Ivanovna proceeded to enlarge on the peaceful and happy life they would lead in tea, on the gymnasium teachers whom she would engage to give lessons in her boarding school, one a most respectable old Frenchman, one Mangot, who had taught Katerina Ivanovna herself in old days and was still living in T, and would no doubt teach in her school on moderate terms. Next, she spoke of Sonya, who would go with her to tea and help her in all her plans. At this, someone at the further end of the table gave a sudden guffaw. Though Katerina Ivanovna tried to appear to be disdainfully unaware of it, she raised her voice and began at once speaking with conviction of Sonya's undoubted ability to assist her, of her gentleness, patience, devotion, generosity and good education, tapping Sonya on the cheek and kissing her warmly twice. Sonya flushed crimson, and Katerina Ivanovna suddenly burst into tears, immediately observing that she was nervous and silly, that she was too much upset, that it was time to finish, and as the dinner was over, it was time to hand round the tea. At that moment, Amelia Ivanovna, deeply aggrieved at taking no part in the conversation, and not being listened to, made one last effort, and with secret misgivings ventured on an exceedingly deep and weighty observation, that in the future boarding school she would have to pay particular attention to dye wash, and that there certainly must be a good dame to look after the linen, and secondly that the young ladies must not novels at night read. Katerina Ivanovna, who certainly was upset and very tired, as well as heartily sick of the dinner, at once cut short Amelia Ivanovna, saying she knew nothing about it and was talking nonsense, that it was the business of the laundry maid, and not of the directress of a high-class boarding school to look after dye wash, and as for novel reading, that was simply rudeness, and she begged her to be silent. Amelia Ivanovna fired up and getting angry observed that she only meant her good, and that she had meant her very good, and that it was long since she had paid her gold for the lodgings. Katerina Ivanovna at once set her down, saying that it was a lie to say she wished her good, because only yesterday when her dead husband was lying on the table, she had worried her about the lodgings. To this Amelia Ivanovna very appropriately observed that she had invited those ladies, but those ladies had not come, because those ladies are ladies, and cannot come to a lady who is not a lady. Katerina Ivanovna at once pointed out to her that as she was a slut she could not judge what made one really a lady. Amelia Ivanovna at once declared that her Vader aus Berlin was a very, very important man, and both hands in pockets went, and always used to say, "Poof, poof," and she leapt up from the table to represent her father, sticking her hands in her pockets, puffing her cheeks, and uttering vague sounds resembling poof, poof, amid loud laughter from all the lodgers, who purposely encouraged Amelia Ivanovna, hoping for a fight. But this was too much for Katerina Ivanovna, and she at once declared, so that all could hear, that Amelia Ivanovna probably never had a father, but was simply a drunken Petersburg Finn, and had certainly once been a cook and probably something worse. Amelia Ivanovna turned as red as a lobster and squealed that perhaps Katerina Ivanovna never had a father, but she had a Vader aus Berlin, and that he wore a long coat and always said poof poof poof. Katerina Ivanovna observed contemptuously that all knew what her family was, and that on that very certificate of honor it was stated in print that her father was a colonel, while Amelia Ivanovna's father, if she really had one, was probably some Finnish milkman, but that probably she never had a father at all, since it was still uncertain whether her name was Amelia Ivanovna or Amelia Ludwigovna. At this Amelia Ivanovna, lashed to fury, struck the table with her fist, and shrieked that she was Amelia Ivanovna and not Ludwigovna, that her Vader was named Johann and that he was a burgomister, and that Katerina Ivanovna's Vader was quite never a burgomister. Katerina Ivanovna rose from her chair, and with a stern and apparently calm voice, though she was pale and her chest was heaving, observed that if she dared for one moment to set her contemptible wretch of a father on a level with her papa, she, Katerina Ivanovna, would tear her cap off her head and trample it underfoot. Amelia Ivanovna ran about the room, shouting at the top of her voice that she was mistress of the house and that Katerina Ivanovna should leave the lodgings that minute. Then she rushed for some reason to collect the silver spoons from the table. There was a great outcry and uproar. The children began crying. Sonya ran to restrain Katerina Ivanovna, but when Amelia Ivanovna shouted something about the yellow ticket, Katerina Ivanovna pushed Sonya away and rushed at the landlady to carry out her threat. At that minute the door opened, and Fyodor Petrovich Luzhin appeared on the threshold. He stood scanning the party with severe and vigilant eyes. Katerina Ivanovna rushed to him. Chapter 3. Fyodor Petrovich, she cried, protect me, you at least. Make this foolish woman understand that she can't behave like this to a lady in misfortune, that there is a law for such things. I'll go to the Governor General himself. She shall answer for it. Remembering my father's hospitality, protect these orphans. Allow me, madam, allow me. Fyodor Petrovich waved her off. Your papa, as you are well aware, I had not the honor of knowing. Someone laughed aloud, and I do not intend to take part in your everlasting squabbles with Amalia Ivanovna. I have come here to speak of my own affairs, and I want to have a word with your stepdaughter, Sofia. Ivanovna, I think it is. Allow me to pass. Fyodor Petrovich, edging by her, went to the opposite corner where Sonya was. Katerina Ivanovna remained standing where she was, as though thunderstruck. She could not understand how Fyodor Petrovich could deny having enjoyed her father's hospitality. Though she had invented it herself, she believed in it firmly by this time. She was struck too by the businesslike, dry, and even contemptuous menacing tone of Fyodor Petrovich. All the clamor gradually died away at his entrance. Not only was this serious businessman strikingly incongruous with the rest of the party, but it was evident, too, that he had come upon some matter of consequence, that some exceptional cause must have brought him, and that therefore something was going to happen. Raskolnikov, standing beside Sonya, moved aside to let him pass. Fyodor Petrovich did not seem to notice him. A minute later Lebeziatnikov, too, appeared in the doorway. He did not come in but stood still, listening with marked interest, almost wonder, and seemed for a time perplexed. Excuse me for possibly interrupting you, but it's a matter of some importance, Fyodor Petrovich observed, addressing the company generally. I am glad indeed to find other persons present. Amalia Ivanovna, I humbly beg you as mistress of the house to pay careful attention to what I have to say to Sofia Ivanovna. Sofia Ivanovna, he went on, addressing Sonya, who was very much surprised and already alarmed. Immediately after your visit, I found that 100-ruble note was missing from my table, in the room of my friend Mr. Lebeziatnikov. If in any way whatever you know and will tell us where it is now, I assure you on my word of honor and call all present to witness that the matter shall end there. In the opposite case, I shall be compelled to have recourse to very serious measures, and then, you must blame yourself. Complete silence reigned in the room. Even the crying children were still. Sonya stood deadly pale, staring at Luzhin and unable to say a word. She seemed not to understand. Some seconds passed. Well, how is it to be then? Asked Luzhin, looking intently at her. I don't know, I know nothing about it, Sonya articulated faintly at last. No, you know nothing, Luzhin repeated, and again he paused for some seconds. Think a moment, mademoiselle, he began severely but still, as it were, admonishing her. Reflect, I am prepared to give you time for consideration. Kindly observe this. If I were not so entirely convinced I should not, you may be sure, with my experience, venture to accuse you so directly. Seeing that for such direct accusation before witnesses, if false or even mistaken, I should myself in a certain sense be made responsible, I am aware of that. This morning, I changed for my own purposes several 5% securities for the sum of approximately 3,000 rubles. The account is noted down in my pocketbook. On my return home, I proceeded to count the money, as Mr. Lebeziatnikov will bear witness, and after counting 2,300 rubles, I put the rest in my pocketbook in my coat pocket. About 500 rubles remained on the table, and among them 3 notes of 100 rubles each. At that moment you entered, at my invitation, and all the time you were present you were exceedingly embarrassed, so that 3 times you jumped up in the middle of the conversation and tried to make off. Mr. Lebeziatnikov can bear witness to this. You yourself, mademoiselle, probably will not refuse to confirm my statement that I invited you through Mr. Lebeziatnikov, solely in order to discuss with you the hopeless and destitute position of your relative Katerina Ivanovna, whose dinner I was unable to attend, and the advisability of getting up something of the nature of a subscription, lottery or the like, for her benefit. You thanked me and even shed tears. I describe all this as it took place, primarily to recall it to your mind, and secondly to show you that not the slightest detail has escaped my recollection. Then I took a 10-ruble note from the table and handed it to you by way of first installment on my part for the benefit of your relative. Mr. Lebeziatnikov saw all this. Then I accompanied you to the door. you being still in the same state of embarrassment. After which, being left alone with Mr. Lebeziatnikov, I talked to him for 10 minutes. Then Mr. Lebeziatnikov went out and I returned to the table with the money lying on it, intending to count it and to put it aside, as I proposed doing before. To my surprise, 100-ruble note had disappeared. Kindly consider the position. Mr. Lebeziatnikov I cannot suspect. I am ashamed to allude to such a supposition. I cannot have made a mistake in my reckoning, for the minute before your entrance I had finished my accounts and found the total correct. You will admit that recollecting your embarrassment, your eagerness to get away, and the fact that you kept your hands for some time on the table, and taking into consideration your social position and the habits associated with it, I was, so to say, with horror and positively against my will, compelled to entertain a suspicion. A cruel but justifiable suspicion. I will add further and repeat that in spite of my positive conviction, I realize that I run a certain risk in making this accusation. But as you see, I could not let it pass. I have taken action and I will tell you why. Solely, madam, solely owing to your black ingratitude. Why I invite you for the benefit of your destitute relative, I present you with my donation of 10 rubles, and you on the spot repay me for all that with such an action. It is too bad, you need a lesson. Reflect. Moreover, like a true friend I beg you, and you could have no better friend at this moment. Think what you are doing, otherwise I shall be immovable. Well, what do you say? I have taken nothing, Sonya whispered in terror. You gave me 10 rubles, here it is, take it. Sonya pulled her handkerchief out of her pocket, untied a corner of it, took out the 10-ruble note and gave it to Luzhin. And the 100 rubles you do not confess to taking, he insisted reproachfully, not taking the note. Sonya looked about her. All were looking at her with such awful, stern, ironical, hostile eyes. She looked at Raskolnikov. He stood against the wall with his arms crossed, looking at her with glowing eyes. Good God, broke from Sonya. Amalia Ivanovna, we shall have to send word to the police, and therefore I humbly beg you meanwhile to send for the house porter, Luzhin said softly and even kindly. Gott der Barmherzige, I knew she was the thief, cried Amalia Ivanovna, throwing up her hands. You knew it? Luzhin caught her up. Then I suppose you had some reason before this for thinking so. I beg you, worthy Amalia Ivanovna, to remember your words which have been uttered before witnesses. There was a buzz of loud conversation on all sides. All were in movement. What? Cried Katerina Ivanovna, suddenly realizing the position, and she rushed at Luzhin. What, you accuse her of stealing? Sonya? Ah, the wretches, the wretches. And running to Sonya, she flung her wasted arms round her, and held her as in a vice. Sonya, how dared you take 10 rubles from him? Foolish girl, give it to me, give me the 10 rubles at once here. And snatching the note from Sonya, Katerina Ivanovna crumpled it up and flung it straight into Luzhin's face. It hit him in the eye and fell on the ground. Amalia Ivanovna hastened to pick it up. Fyodor Petrovich lost his temper. Hold that mad woman, he shouted. At that moment, several other persons, besides Lebeziatnikov, appeared in the doorway, among them the 2 ladies. What, mad? Am I mad? Idiot! Shrieked Katerina Ivanovna. You are an idiot yourself, pettifogging lawyer, base man. Sonya, Sonya, take his money. Sonya a thief, why she'd give away her last penny. And Katerina Ivanovna broke into hysterical laughter. Did you ever see such an idiot? She turned from side to side. And you too. She suddenly saw the landlady. And you too, sausage eater, you declare that she is a thief, you trashy Prussian hen's leg and a crinoline. She hasn't been out of this room. She came straight from you, you wretch, and sat down beside me. Everyone saw her. She sat here, by Rodion Romanovich. Search her. Since she's not left the room, the money would have to be on her. Search her, search her. But if you don't find it, then excuse me, my dear fellow, you'll answer for it. I'll go to our sovereign, to our gracious Tsar himself, and throw myself at his feet today, this minute. I am alone in the world. They would let me in. Do you think they would? You're wrong. I will get in. I will get in. You reckoned on her meekness. You relied upon that. But I am not so submissive, let me tell you. You've gone too far yourself. Search her, search her. And Katerina Ivanovna in a frenzy shook Luzhin, and dragged him towards Sonya. I am ready, I'll be responsible. But calm yourself, madam, calm yourself. I see that you are not so submissive. Well, well, but as to that, Luzhin muttered, that ought to be before the police. Though indeed there are witnesses enough as it is. I am ready. But in any case it's difficult for a man, on account of her sex. But with the help of Amalia Ivanovna, though of course it's not the way to do things. How is it to be done? As you will, let anyone who likes search her, cried Katerina Ivanovna. Sonya, turn out your pockets, see. Look, monster, the pocket is empty, here was her handkerchief. Here is the other pocket, look. 500 UC. And Katerina Ivanovna turned, or rather snatched, both pockets inside out. But from the right pocket a piece of paper flew out and describing a parabola in the air fell at Luzhin's feet. Everyone saw it, several cried out. Fyodor Petrovich stooped down, picked up the paper in 2 fingers, lifted it where all could see it and opened it. It was a 100-ruble note folded in 8. Fyodor Petrovich held up the note showing it to everyone. Thief, out of my lodging, police, police, yelled Amalia Ivanovna. They must to Siberia be sent, away. Exclamations arose on all sides. Raskolnikov was silent, keeping his eyes fixed on Sonya, except for an occasional rapid glance at Luzhin. Sonya stood still, as though unconscious. She was hardly able to feel surprise. Suddenly the color rushed to her cheeks. She uttered a cry and hid her face in her hands. No, it was I didn't take it. I know nothing about it, she cried with a heartrending wail, and she ran to Katerina Ivanovna, who clasped her tightly in her arms, as though she would shelter her from all the world. Sonya, Sonya, I don't believe it, you see I don't believe it. She cried in the face of the obvious fact, swaying her to and fro in her arms like a baby, kissing her face continually, then snatching at her hands and kissing them too. You took it. How stupid these people are. Oh dear, you are fools, fools, she cried, addressing the whole room. You don't know what a heart she has, what a girl she is. She'd take it, she'd sell her last rag, she'd go barefoot to help you if you needed it, that's what she is. She has the yellow passport because my children were starving, she sold herself for us. Ah, husband, do you see, what a memorial dinner for you. Merciful heavens, defend her, why are you all standing still? Rodion Romanovich, why don't you stand up for her? Do you believe it too? You are not worth her little finger, all of you together. Good God, defend her now at least. The wail of the poor, consumptive, helpless woman seemed to produce a great effect on her audience. The agonized, wasted, consumptive face, the parched blood-stained lips, the hoarse voice, the tears unrestrained as a child's, the trustful, childish, and yet despairing prayer for help were so piteous that everyone seemed to feel for her. Fyodor Petrovich at any rate was at once moved to compassion. Madam, this incident does not reflect upon you. He cried impressively. No one would take upon himself to accuse you of being an instigator or even an accomplice in it, especially as you have proved her guilt by turning out her pockets, showing that you had no previous idea of it. I am most ready to show compassion if poverty, so to speak, drove Sofya Semyonovna to it. But why did you refuse to confess, mademoiselle? Were you afraid of the disgrace, the first step? You lost your head perhaps. One can quite understand it. But how could you have lowered yourself to such an action? Gentlemen, he addressed the whole company, gentlemen. Compassionate and, so to say, commiserating these people, I am ready to overlook it even now in spite of the personal insult lavished upon me. And may this disgrace be a lesson to you for the future, he said, addressing Sonya, and I will carry the matter no further. Enough. Fyodor Petrovich stole a glance at Raskolnikov. Their eyes met, and the fire in Raskolnikov seemed ready to reduce him to ashes. Meanwhile Katerina Ivanovna apparently heard nothing. She was kissing and hugging Sonya like a madwoman. The children, too, were embracing Sonya on all sides, and Polenka, though she did not fully understand what was wrong, was drowned in tears and shaking with sobs as she hid her pretty little face, swollen with weeping, on Sonya's shoulder. How vile! A loud voice cried suddenly in the doorway. Fyodor Petrovich looked round quickly. What vileness? Lebeziatnikov repeated, staring him straight in the face. Fyodor Petrovich gave a positive start. All noticed it and recalled it afterwards. Lebeziatnikov strode into the room. And you dared to call me as witness, he said, going up to Fyodor Petrovich. What do you mean, what are you talking about? Muttered Luzhin. I mean that you are a slanderer, that's what my words mean, Lebeziatnikov said hotly, looking sternly at him with his short-sighted eyes. He was extremely angry. Raskolnikov gazed intently at him, as though seizing and weighing each word. Again there was a silence. Fyodor Petrovich indeed seemed almost dumbfounded for the first moment. If you mean that for me, he began, stammering, but what's the matter with you, are you out of your mind? I'm in my mind, but you are a scoundrel. Ah, how vile, I have heard everything. I kept waiting on purpose to understand it, for I must own even now it is not quite logical. What you have done at all for I can't understand. Why, what have I done then? Give over talking in your nonsensical riddles, or maybe you are drunk. You may be a drunkard perhaps, vile man, but I am not. I never touch vodka for it's against my convictions. Would you believe it, he himself, with his own hands gave Sofya Semyonovna that 100-ruble note. I saw it, I was a witness, I'll take my oath. He did it, he, repeated Lebeziatnikov, addressing all. Are you crazy, milksop? Squealed Luzhin. She is herself before you, she herself here declared just now before everyone that I gave her only 10 rubles. How could I have given it to her? I saw it, Lebeziatnikov repeated, and though it is against my principles, I am ready this very minute to take any oath you like before the court, for I saw how you slipped it in her pocket. Only like a fool I thought you did it out of kindness. When you were saying goodbye to her at the door, while you held her hand in one hand, with the other, the left, you slipped the note into her pocket. I saw it. Luzhin turned pale. What lies? He cried impudently. Why, how could you, standing by the window, see the note? You fancied it with your short-sighted eyes, you are raving. No, I didn't fancy it. And though I was standing some way off, I saw it all. And though it certainly would be hard to distinguish a note from the window, that's true, I knew for certain that it was a 100-ruble note, because, when you were going to give Sofya Semyonovna 10 rubles, you took up from the table a 100-ruble note. I saw it because I was standing near then, and an idea struck me at once, so that I did not forget you had it in your hand. You folded it and kept it in your hand all the time. I didn't think of it again until when you were getting up, you changed it from your right hand to your left and nearly dropped it. I noticed it because the same idea struck me again, that you meant to do her a kindness without my seeing. You can fancy how I watched you, and I saw how you succeeded in slipping it into her pocket. I saw it, I'll take my oath. Lebeziatnikov was almost breathless. Exclamations arose on all hands, chiefly expressive of wonder, but some were menacing in tone. They all crowded round Fyodor Petrovich. Katerina Ivanovna flew to Lebeziatnikov. I was mistaken in you, protect her, you are the only one to take her part, she is an orphan, God has sent you. Katerina Ivanovna, hardly knowing what she was doing, sank on her knees before him. A pack of nonsense, yelled Luzhin, roused to fury, it's all nonsense you've been talking. An idea struck you, you didn't think, you noticed, what does it amount to, so I gave it to her on the sly on purpose. What for, with what object, what have I to do with this? What for, that's what I can't understand, but that what I am telling you is the fact, that's certain. So far from my being mistaken, you infamous criminal man, I remember how, on account of it, a question occurred to me at once, just when I was thanking you and pressing your hand. What made you put it secretly in her pocket? Why you did it secretly, I mean. Could it be simply to conceal it from me, knowing that my convictions are opposed to yours, and that I do not approve of private benevolence, which effects no radical cure? Well, I decided that you really were ashamed of giving such a large sum before me. Perhaps, too, I thought, he wants to give her a surprise, when she finds a whole 100-ruble note in her pocket. For I know, some benevolent people are very fond of decking out their charitable actions in that way. Then the idea struck me, too, that you wanted to test her, to see whether when she found it she would come to thank you. Then, too, that you wanted to avoid thanks, and that, as the saying is, your right hand should not know. Something of that sort, in fact. I thought of so many possibilities that I put off considering it, but still thought it indelicate to show you that I knew your secret. But another idea struck me again, that Sofya Semyonovna might easily lose the money before she noticed it. That was why I decided to come in here to call her out of the room, and to tell her that you put 100 rubles in her pocket. But on my way, I went first to Madame Kobylatnikov's to take them the general treatise on the positive method, and especially to recommend Pydrat's article, and also Wagner's. Then I come on here, and what a state of things I find. Now could I have all these ideas and reflections if I had not seen you put the 100-ruble note in her pocket? When Lebeziatnikov finished his long-winded harangue with the logical deduction at the end, he was quite tired, and the perspiration streamed from his face. He could not, alas, even express himself correctly in Russian, though he knew no other language, so that he was quite exhausted, almost emaciated after this heroic exploit. But his speech produced a powerful effect. He had spoken with such vehemence, with such conviction that everyone obviously believed him. Fyodor Petrovich felt that things were going badly with him. "What is it to do with me if silly ideas did occur to you?" he shouted. "That's no evidence. You may have dreamt it, that's all. And I tell you, you are lying, sir. You are lying and slandering from some spite against me, simply from pique, because I did not agree with your free-thinking, godless social propositions." But this retort did not benefit Fyodor Petrovich. Murmurs of disapproval were heard on all sides. "Ah, that's your line now, is it?" cried Lebeziatnikov. "That's nonsense. Call the police and I'll take my oath. There's only one thing I can't understand. What made him risk such a contemptible action? Oh, pitiful, despicable man. I can explain why he risked such an action, and if necessary, I too will swear to it," Raskolnikov said at last in a firm voice, and he stepped forward. He appeared to be firm and composed. Everyone felt clearly, from the very look of him, that he really knew about it, and that the mystery would be solved. "Now I can explain it all to myself," said Raskolnikov, addressing Lebeziatnikov. "From the very beginning of the business, I suspected that there was some scoundrelly intrigue at the bottom of it. I began to suspect it from some special circumstances known to me only, which I will explain at once to everyone. They account for everything. Your valuable evidence has finally made everything clear to me. I beg all to listen. This gentleman," he pointed to Luzhin, "was recently engaged to be married to a young lady, my sister, Avdiya Romanovna Raskolnikov. But coming to Petersburg, he quarreled with me, the day before yesterday, at our first meeting, and I drove him out of my room. I have 2 witnesses to prove it. He is a very spiteful man. The day before yesterday, I did not know that he was staying here, in your room, and that consequently on the very day we quarreled, the day before yesterday, he saw me give Katerina Ivanovna some money for the funeral, as a friend of the late Mr. Marmeladov. He at once wrote a note to my mother, and informed her that I had given away all my money, not to Katerina Ivanovna, but to Sofya Semyonovna, and referred in a most contemptible way to the character of Sofya Semyonovna, that is, hinted at the character of my attitude to Sofya Semyonovna. All this, you understand, was with the object of dividing me from my mother and sister, by insinuating that I was squandering on unworthy objects the money which they had sent me, and which was all they had. Yesterday evening, before my mother and sister, and in his presence, I declared that I had given the money to Katerina Ivanovna for the funeral and not to Sofya Semyonovna, and that I had no acquaintance with Sofya Semyonovna, and had never seen her before, indeed. At the same time I added that he, Fyodor Petrovich Luzhin, with all his virtues, was not worth Sofya Semyonovna's little finger, though he spoke so ill of her. To his question, would I let Sofya Semyonovna sit down beside my sister, I answered that I had already done so that day. Irritated that my mother and sister were unwilling to quarrel with me at his insinuations, he gradually began being unpardonably rude to them. A final rupture took place, and he was turned out of the house. All this happened yesterday evening. Now I beg your special attention. Consider, if he had now succeeded in proving that Sofya Semyonovna was a thief, he would have shown to my mother and sister that he was almost right in his suspicions, that he had reason to be angry at my putting my sister on a level with Sofya Semyonovna, that, in attacking me, he was protecting and preserving the honor of my sister, his betrothed. In fact, he might even, through all this, have been able to estrange me from my family, and no doubt he hoped to be restored to favor with them, to say nothing of revenging himself on me personally, for he has grounds for supposing that the honor and happiness of Sofya Semyonovna are very precious to me. That was what he was working for. That's how I understand it. That's the whole reason for it, and there can be no other. It was like this, or somewhat like this, that Raskolnikov wound up his speech, which was followed very attentively, though often interrupted by exclamations from his audience. But in spite of interruptions, he spoke clearly, calmly, exactly, firmly. His decisive voice, his tone of conviction, and his stern face made a great impression on everyone. Yes, that's it, Lebeziatnikov assented gleefully. That must be it, for he asked me, as soon as Sofya Semyonovna came into our room, whether you were here, whether I had seen you among Katerina Ivanovna's guests. He called me aside to the window and asked me in secret. It was essential for him that you should be here. That's it. Luzhin smiled contemptuously and did not speak. But he was very pale. He seemed to be deliberating on some means of escape. Perhaps he would have been glad to give up everything and get away, but at the moment this was scarcely possible. It would have implied admitting the truth of the accusations brought against him. Moreover, the company, which had already been excited by drink, was now too much stirred to allow it. The commissariat clerk, though indeed he had not grasped the whole position, was shouting louder than anyone and was making some suggestions very unpleasant to Luzhin. But not all those present were drunk. Lodgers came in from all the rooms. The three Poles were tremendously excited and were continually shouting at him, "The pan is a lajdek," and muttering threats in Polish. Sonya had been listening with strained attention, though she too seemed unable to grasp it all. She seemed as though she had just returned to consciousness. She did not take her eyes off Raskolnikov, feeling that all her safety lay in him. Katerina Ivanovna breathed hard and painfully and seemed fearfully exhausted. Amalia Ivanovna stood looking more stupid than anyone, with her mouth wide open, unable to make out what had happened. She only saw that Fyodor Petrovich had somehow come to grief. Raskolnikov was attempting to speak again, but they did not let him. Everyone was crowding round Luzhin with threats and shouts of abuse. But Fyodor Petrovich was not intimidated. Seeing that his accusation of Sonya had completely failed, he had recourse to insolence. "Allow me, gentlemen, allow me, don't squeeze, let me pass," he said, making his way through the crowd. "And no threats, if you please. I assure you it will be useless, you will gain nothing by it. On the contrary, you'll have to answer, gentlemen, for violently obstructing the course of justice. The thief has been more than unmasked, and I shall prosecute. Our judges are not so blind and not so drunk, and will not believe the testimony of two notorious infidels, agitators, and atheists, who accuse me from motives of personal revenge which they are foolish enough to admit. Yes, allow me to pass. Don't let me find a trace of you in my room. Kindly leave at once, and everything is at an end between us. When I think of the trouble I've been taking, the way I've been expounding, all this fortnight. I told you myself today that I was going, when you tried to keep me. Now I will simply add that you are a fool. I advise you to see a doctor for your brains and your short sight. Let me pass, gentlemen." He forced his way through, but the commissariat clerk was unwilling to let him off so easily. He picked up a glass from the table, brandished it in the air and flung it at Fyodor Petrovich, but the glass flew straight at Amalia Ivanovna. She screamed, and the clerk, overbalancing, fell heavily under the table. Fyodor Petrovich made his way to his room and half an hour later had left the house. Sonya, timid by nature, had felt before that day that she could be ill-treated more easily than anyone, and that she could be wronged with impunity. Yet till that moment, she had fancied that she might escape misfortune by care, gentleness, and submissiveness before everyone. Her disappointment was too great. She could, of course, bear with patience and almost without murmur anything, even this. But for the first minute she felt it too bitter. In spite of her triumph and her justification, when her first terror and stupefaction had passed, and she could understand it all clearly, the feeling of her helplessness and of the wrong done to her made her heart throb with anguish, and she was overcome with hysterical weeping. At last, unable to bear any more, she rushed out of the room and ran home, almost immediately after Luzhin's departure. When amidst loud laughter the glass flew at Amalia Ivanovna, it was more than the landlady could endure. With a shriek she rushed like a fury at Katerina Ivanovna, considering her to blame for everything. "Out of my lodgings, at once, quick march." And with these words she began snatching up everything she could lay her hands on that belonged to Katerina Ivanovna, and throwing it on the floor. Katerina Ivanovna, pale, almost fainting, and gasping for breath, jumped up from the bed where she had sunk in exhaustion and darted at Amalia Ivanovna. But the battle was too unequal. The landlady waved her away like a feather. "What, as though that godless calumny was not enough, this vile creature attacks me. What, on the day of my husband's funeral I am turned out of my lodging. After eating my bread and salt she turns me into the street with my orphans. Where am I to go?" wailed the poor woman, sobbing and gasping. "Good God," she cried with flashing eyes, "is there no justice upon earth? Whom should you protect if not us orphans? We shall see. There is law and justice on earth, there is, I will find it. Wait a bit, godless creature. Polenka, stay with the children, I'll come back. Wait for me if you have to wait in the street. We will see whether there is justice on earth." And throwing over her head that green shawl which Marmeladov had mentioned to Raskolnikov, Katerina Ivanovna squeezed her way through the disorderly and drunken crowd of lodgers who still filled the room, and wailing and tearful, she ran into the street, with a vague intention of going at once somewhere to find justice. Polenka with the two little ones in her arms crouched, terrified, on the trunk in the corner of the room, where she waited trembling for her mother to come back. Amalia Ivanovna raged about the room, shrieking, lamenting and throwing everything she came across on the floor. The lodgers talked incoherently. Some commented to the best of their ability on what had happened. Others quarreled and swore at one another, while others struck up a song. "Now it's time for me to go," thought Raskolnikov. "Well, Sofya Semyonovna, we shall see what you'll say now." And he set off in the direction of Sonya's lodgings. Chapter 4. Raskolnikov had been a vigorous and active champion of Sonya against Luzhin, although he had such a load of horror and anguish in his own heart. But having gone through so much in the morning, he found a sort of relief in a change of sensations, apart from the strong personal feeling which impelled him to defend Sonya. He was agitated too, especially at some moments by the thought of his approaching interview with Sonya. He had to tell her who had killed Lizaveta. He knew the terrible suffering it would be to him and, as it were, brushed away the thought of it. So when he cried as he left Katerina Ivanovna's, "Well, Sofya Semyonovna, we shall see what you'll say now," he was still superficially excited, still vigorous and defiant from his triumph over Luzhin. But strange to say, by the time he reached Sonya's lodging, he felt a sudden impotence and fear. He stood still in hesitation at the door, asking himself the strange question: must he tell her who killed Lizaveta? It was a strange question because he felt at the very time not only that he could not help telling her, but also that he could not put off the telling. He did not yet know why it must be so, he only felt it, and the agonizing sense of his impotence before the inevitable almost crushed him. To cut short his hesitation and suffering, he quickly opened the door and looked at Sonya from the doorway. She was sitting with her elbows on the table and her face in her hands, but seeing Raskolnikov she got up at once, and came to meet him as though she were expecting him. "What would have become of me but for you?" she said quickly, meeting him in the middle of the room. Evidently, she was in haste to say this to him. It was what she had been waiting for. Raskolnikov went to the table and sat down on the chair from which she had only just risen. She stood facing him, 2 steps away, just as she had done the day before. "Well, Sonya," he said, and felt that his voice was trembling, "it was all due to your social position and the habits associated with it. Did you understand that just now?" Her face showed her distress. "Only don't talk to me as you did yesterday," she interrupted him. "Please don't begin it. There is misery enough without that." She made haste to smile, afraid that he might not like the reproach. "I was silly to come away from there. What is happening there now? I wanted to go back directly, but I kept thinking that you would come." He told her that Amalia Ivanovna was turning them out of their lodging, and that Katerina Ivanovna had run off somewhere to seek justice. "My God," cried Sonya, "let's go at once." And she snatched up her cape. "It's everlastingly the same thing," said Raskolnikov irritably. "You've no thought except for them. Stay a little with me." "But, Katerina Ivanovna." "You won't lose Katerina Ivanovna, you may be sure. She'll come to you herself since she has run out," he added peevishly. "If she doesn't find you here, you'll be blamed for it." Sonya sat down in painful suspense. Raskolnikov was silent, gazing at the floor and deliberating. "This time Luzhin did not want to prosecute you," he began, not looking at Sonya, "but if he had wanted to, if it had suited his plans, he would have sent you to prison if it had not been for Lebeziatnikov and me." "Ah." "Yes," she assented in a faint voice. "Yes," she repeated, preoccupied and distressed. "But I might easily not have been there, and it was quite an accident Lebeziatnikov's turning up." Sonya was silent. "And if you'd gone to prison, what then? Do you remember what I said yesterday?" Again she did not answer. He waited. "I thought you would cry out again, 'Don't speak of it, leave off.'" Raskolnikov gave a laugh, but rather a forced one. "What silence again?" he asked a minute later. "We must talk about something, you know. It would be interesting for me to know how you would decide a certain problem, as Lebeziatnikov would say." He was beginning to lose the thread. "No, really, I am serious. Imagine, Sonya, that you had known all Luzhin's intentions beforehand. Known, that is for a fact, that they would be the ruin of Katerina Ivanovna and the children and yourself thrown in, since you don't count yourself for anything, Polenka too. For she'll go the same way. Well, if suddenly it all depended on your decision whether he or they should go on living, that is whether Luzhin should go on living and doing wicked things or Katerina Ivanovna should die. How would you decide which of them was to die, I ask you?" Sonya looked uneasily at him. There was something peculiar in this hesitating question, which seemed approaching something in a roundabout way. I felt that you were going to ask some question like that, she said, looking inquisitively at him. I dare say you did, but how is it to be answered? Why do you ask about what could not happen? Said Sonya reluctantly. Then it would be better for Luzhin to go on living and doing wicked things. You haven't dared to decide even that. But I can't know the divine providence. And why do you ask what can't be answered? What's the use of such foolish questions? How could it happen that it should depend on my decision? Who has made me a judge to decide who is to live and who is not to live? Oh, if the divine providence is to be mixed up in it, there is no doing anything, Raskolnikov grumbled morosely. You'd better say straight out what you want, Sonya cried in distress. You are leading up to something again. Can you have come simply to torture me? She could not control herself and began crying bitterly. He looked at her in gloomy misery. 5 minutes passed.